Today's message is transcendence is required, and why it is required in this fallen world that we live in and the lives that we live. The world is obviously full of suffering, tragedy, and chaos, as is our lives oftentimes, unfortunately. We see it in history, we see it in the news. How do we make sense of it? How do we find meaning in this struggle? This message is specifically for you if you're going through a difficult time or have gone through difficult times and you're reflecting back. What was it all about? Why did that happen? It doesn't make sense. Life is chaotic. And you may have even come to the point where you're saying, I'm just going to live basically for me. It's dog eat dog, eye for an eye world that we live in, and there's really no use in it. If taken to its logical conclusion, it ends in nihilism. Materialism and rationalism and the philosophies of those are very good. They tell us a lot about how to navigate the real world, the physical world we live in. But they fail to provide all of the answers. They are an incomplete philosophy. They are an incomplete system. Materialism tells us that we're all basically just our thoughts, our emotions, and our struggles. I see a lot of YouTubers that are into self-development, and to watch them and to listen to them, while they do often offer very good advice, that you would think by listening to them that we are nothing more than just bags of chemicals that are wholly governed by the rise and fall of dopamine in our bodies. And that if we could only just get the chemical levels and the dopamine just right and do the right things and get the perfect amount of sunlight and the perfect amount of nutrients, the perfect amount of sleep, and regulate that dopamine to the optimum levels that we could possibly do it, we would have happy and fulfilling lives. To them, we are nothing more than biological bags of chemicals. And they're missing out on the whole picture. While yes, nutrition, proper sleep, and all of that, and probably regulating your dopamine is important, it will not lead to a fulfilling life. It will not lead to a full existence. We're going to talk about some practical ways on how to connect with the transcendent and how to fully realize and gain a better perspective on your life and where your life is going and where it can go. And again, I'd like to say that this concept of transcendence and the reality of there being a spiritual realm, which is an actual place. Many of the philosophers and the ancient wisdom, and indeed modern wisdom, espouses that this place is inhabited by real creatures and real beings. But the reality of this spiritual place, juxtaposed with the reality of the physical realm, which is where we exist and all that we can see, is not just some mind hack or mind trick to get us through the tough times. Oh, we're just playing, we're kind of hypnotizing ourselves in a sense. We're taking a leap of faith and we're telling ourselves something just to get us through. If you can come to the place, and I believe this is authentic and real, or I would not be talking about it now and I would not live my life this way. But if you can come to the place in your mind and your heart that you realize that that transcendence is real, that is, that there is a real spiritual realm and we are affected by it, it really opens up the perspective on your life. I mentioned some of the ancient philosophers had things to say about this and about the reality of transcendence. For example, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and famous Stoic philosopher, wrote, "Have this possibility that you may leave this life at any moment in all that you do, say, or think." In a sense, he's almost saying God is watching. Our angels are watching us. Everything, if you put it in that context, then everything you do, say, or think is given more of a gravity and a significance. He also wrote that everything harmonizes with me, which is harmonious to thee, O universe. Marcus Aurelius was a very wise man, and he seemed to realize the need for transcendence. You may have heard about the concept of the hero's journey, and surely you've seen it in movies you've watched. You know, oftentimes I'll find myself watching a very good movie and I'll get caught up in the protagonist of the movie. And a really good story or a really good movie always involves several parts. It involves the struggle, the unrefined, the raw man that faces challenges. He faces life. He goes forth into the world, and he is often bloodied and bruised, either metaphorically or literally, by the challenges of life. And we watch him go through this process of struggle, of overcoming challenges, and ultimately emerging on the other side victorious as a hero. And we know inherently, without stating it to ourselves, that this character, the protagonist in the movie, is now a better person. We respect them. In a sense, if it's a really good movie, you almost love that character. And if you think about it, God and the heavenly hosts may be actually looking at us this same way. They watch us here on earth, here in the physical realm, go through the struggles, the trials, the tribulations. Do we rise to the occasion like the protagonist in the movie, like the hero that we can be? Or do we complain and issue forth lamentations as to why is this happening to me? And do we crumble and fail? Well, if that was what the character in the movie did, we would certainly look at that character in another way. We would perhaps pity them more, and we may even have a slight sense of, I don't want to say disdain, but we would not respect them as much. We certainly wouldn't love them as much if they did not push through it. So I think that's a good analogy, and that may very well be why one of the reasons why we face so many challenges and struggles in life. Probably not the only one. Only God himself knows what the totality of us facing these challenges in life are. But certainly I would think that is one of them. You know, character is forged in the fires of adversity. And if it wasn't for adversity and overcoming challenges, what an uninteresting life we would lead. And what a smaller person we would end up being in the end. We wouldn't grow. That which does not kill us, as Nietzsche said, makes us stronger. Another thought on why are there so many bad things that do happen in the world? You know, if the heavenly realm does exist, the spiritual realm does exist, which I believe to be the case, then there aren't just the good spirits, there are the bad spirits as well. And I don't want to get on a Bible quoting tangent here, that's not what this is about, but there is a lot of wisdom in the Bible. And one of the things that it is written in it is that we battle not against flesh and blood, but we battle against princes and principalities in the heavenly realm, meaning that the evil spirits themselves are participating and trying to get us to have a downfall. But don't lose heart, because the Bible also talks about the fact that the angels are on our side, as is God himself. It is not just a physical struggle, even though the things you may be going through in life, even with other people, it is not just a physical struggle. Often it is a spiritual struggle. Perhaps these people you're going against have some bad spirits. I'm not saying every bad situation in life or every challenge is necessarily spiritual or quote unquote of the demonic, not by a long shot. But I think that a lot of the tragedy and hardship and anger and rage in the world from people directed to other people, more of that is affected by the spiritual realm than most people think. In short, if we stop at materialism and rationalism, we stay trapped in a more or less meaningless life. Or eventually, if we live long enough, we may start to despair that it is meaningless. But if we embrace transcendence, we can endure, grow, and become much more than we currently are. Okay, so what are some practical ways to connect with the transcendent? How do I ultimately abide in peace, expand my perspective to help me live a more meaningful life and peaceful life in this chaotic world and in the chaotic day-to-day happenings of our own lives? A lot of these things you've heard, but you've probably heard them a lot because there's truth in them. And oftentimes, things that are true become what we call cliches, but they are that way because they are inherently true. There is wisdom and truth in them, and truth tends to get repeated, especially when people find out how well it works. Just take a walk in nature. Time in nature, alone in silence, can accomplish so much. You know, the other night I was in my driveway and it's winter where I am now. And the winter sky on a clear night is one of the most beautiful things. I looked up in the sky and I saw the constellation of Orion, which my dad taught me about when I was a small child. You can see the 3 stars that make the belt of Orion. And I looked over a little to the south and I saw this very bright but slightly pink object in the sky. And I just said, that looks like the red planet. That looks like Mars. And I got out a little astronomy app later, and sure enough, it was Mars. You could see Mars, Jupiter, and then Venus kind of in a row across the sky. What am I getting at? Well, this tells us that we live in such a vast universe, and it puts things in perspective. And I think it does give us a true sense of perhaps some kind of a creator and transcendence in general. A lot of peace and a lot of perspective can be gained from looking at a starry night, a clear starry night, taking a walk through the forest, any of those things. Get away from the blue light and get out in the sunlight. You know, a lot of people will pray or meditate, and these are great ways to get a reset through the day. You can read timeless wisdom. I mentioned Marcus Aurelius earlier. Read the Psalms, read the Stoics, the Bhagavad Gita. There are so many ancient scripts, Tolstoy, and some of the great authors that we have had throughout history and that we currently have embraced a lot of suffering in their life. And they've gone on to write these great works of often fiction, but that mirror real life and that give us a deep sense of the transcendent. You can gain a lot of perspective. I would also say read history. I'm reading a great history book now called The Frontiersman, and it talks about the battle between the colonists and the Indians on the frontier, and just the atrocities that happened on both sides, and the history of it, and the human struggle, families getting wiped out. I don't want to go into the details, but the point is we sometimes often think that all the bad things happen just in our 50, 60, 80, 90 years of existence on Earth, when it's a cycle. Humans have been experiencing this for thousands of years ever since we've been here. And my point in saying this is that those humans prevailed, they endured, and oftentimes you will read about how they often maintain the vision and the acceptance of the transcendence and prayer to get them through those tough times. You're not alone. You're not alone in history. Many, many people have gone through this before. If they've done it, you can also do it. Transcendence begins with seeing beyond yourself, seeing beyond the material world. And now is a time in history when materialism, consumerism, and all of that is at an absolute historic high. It has never been higher with the advent of social media and technology. So it might require a little bit more effort or a little bit more willpower to connect with the transcendent than our ancestors did. But it is a real thing, and it is eminently worth it to do so. Hopefully that was helpful. Thank you for listening. If you got any value from anything I said today, please like, please subscribe. It really helps my channel. I appreciate you watching.